Welcome to another episode of On the Floor with Wayne and Rob. I'm Wayne Highlander, National Sales Manager for Bona Adhesives.
And I'm Rob Johnson from Bona Training.
How you doing, Rob?
Oh, I'm doing really good. I'm
That's
in
good.
Dallas right now. Just got in, doing a school this week. Ready to kick it over tomorrow.
Heat and humidity. It's hot in Dallas right now.
It's only 102, but it's a dry heat.
Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah.
It's a dry heat. So isn't a blow, but
So our episode today is going to be on costly mistakes. And before we do, Rob, I got to tell you, I got a new hobby. I kind of a twist on an old hobby. And I we talked about Gen Z recently, and I'm at the age now where I got old friends. I remember when I was 50, and mine was turning 65, and he was bummed out about it. You know, he was depressed. He goes, "Man, it just seems like 65, man. I mean, it didn't bother me when I turned 60, but now 65 just seems to hurt." And I remember saying, "Bothers you? What about me? My best friend is 65 years old. How's that supposed to make me feel?"
how's that supposed to be?
But I've been very fortunate in the last year or so to have a couple friends in my life that one of them is in his mid 70s, I'd say, and the other one is 80 years old. I'm going to tell you about these guys. I'm going to tell you about this generation. So the one guy, I'll give you an example of what this guy's like. I told him I need a lawnmower, just in passing. The guy that mowed my lawns is graduated from college now, and so we either got to hire somebody else to mow the lawns, or I got to do it myself. Or my sweet wife will have to do it when I'm away. But so I told this guy, I'm thinking about buying a lawnmower. So he goes, "Okay, so you need to get one with a stamped deck. It needs to be blah blah blah. You got to make sure you do this, and when you get it, you got to bring it over to me, because all brand new lawnmowers, the blades aren't balanced properly. So you got to bring it to me and have the blade. You got to have the blade balanced." And then you got to sharpen the blades, because you can't trust them that they got the blades really sharp. They don't really do a good job sharpening them. So bring it over to me and I'll take that for you. And this guy, if I was to say to this guy, like we said, "Hey, we got tomato plants, and we're thinking about, or we really like tomatoes, and there's great tomatoes this year." He goes, "Oh, don't buy tomatoes anymore. I'm coming over to your house right now, and I'll show you where you need to plant them in your yard. You need some sticks. I mean, just boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean? On the ball." It's a super good guy, man. And another guy, I was telling him, this guy's 80 years old. I met him at the gym, and if you would ask me how old is this guy, I would have said maybe he's 70, right? As it turns out, he's 80. I told him I like fishing. He goes, "You like trout fishing?" I said, "Yeah." He introduced me to a new style, well, new to me. He's got these little boats that goes down the rivers. You know what I mean? It's a certain boat. And when I told him that, "Yeah, all right, that sounds pretty cool." So the next day he goes, "Here's the boat you need to buy. It's like a kayak, modified kayak." He goes, "All right." So next day he goes, "Did you buy the boat?" I said, "No." He goes, "Well, I found one for you in Portland, Oregon. All right, so here, it's on eBay. Here's the guy's number here. You got to call it." And the next day is, "Okay, did you call it?" "All right, well, because we're going to go on the 13th, and you're going to have to get this anchor, and here, get this." I mean, you know what I mean? I get used to so many people go, "Yeah, man, we'll hook up later. We'll do this, blah, blah, blah." But these guys are boom, man. I mean, they say they're going to do something, they do it. You know what I mean? So the hobby that I have with this guy, we go trout fishing now down these rivers and these little boats. It's like a kayak, except for it's more portable, and I can stand up wherever I need to stand up, and I can walk around in it. And it's added a whole new dimension of fishing to me, because when I get in these rivers, you're out in the middle of nowhere. You know what I mean? And you just go down, and all you hear, you go around the bend, and all you hear is the paddle hitting the water, and it's just you're going back behind farmlands and stuff like that, and it's just peaceful, man.
Is it peaceful?
Oh, it's just it couldn't be any more peaceful. So all you hear is the farm animals, the Mother Nature, and I tell you, Rob, it's heaven. Going back behind farms, you're out in the nature, and this guy doesn't hear very well. He lost his hearing in Vietnam, and sometimes you get separated. And I'll say, you know what? Back in that last area there, I caught 3 trout. And he'll say, I know, but it's going to clear up once the sun comes out. You know what I mean? You can't hear to save his life, but super good fisherman, man. And he's just like having your own personal guide. It's heaven. But the tranquility of being just down there in the rivers, you know, out by yourself, out in the middle of nowhere, to me, it's as good as it gets. You do that type of fishing at all?
Never.
Really?
No,
You come to East Tennessee, I should take you.
I'll have to go with you sometime.
All right. The rivers are pretty deep, though, man. I mean, we get out there, it's back in the middle of nowhere.
Are you fishing in the Nile now?
You would think it's out there. So peaceful.
Did I just hear a monkey?
You might have. I said
Yeah, I
it's
think I just heard a monkey. Yeah.
way out there in it.
All in Tennessee, huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's your new thing. You go around to the gym, you meet these lonely old men who have no friends.
That's it.
And now you're floating down rivers with them and
Oh,
taping all the sound effects too. That's awesome.
it's
That's
heaven.
yes, good for you.
There's a train that goes over top where we fish, and we float right underneath it. I'm telling you, Rob, it's just as good as it gets.
You should be the new Fred on the Howard Stern show with all these sound gags, man. This is amazing. That's what 2 years will do, huh?
Yeah.
2 years doing this.
Mm-hmm. All right. Costly mistakes, Rob.
Costly mistakes.
There's nothing worse.
When you said this one, how many popped into your head?
Several. They came fast and furious.
That is exactly. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm not even talking floor mistakes. I mean, property mistakes.
Yeah. Well, and that's why you need to make a profit on all your jobs, right? Because not everything's going to come out perfect every time, and not everything is there's going to be a hiccup here and there. You're going to make a mistake here and there. You might damage something. Gosh, I'll tell you a story real quick that there was a retail store in California, and I didn't do much work for them and all, but I was friends with the owner, and his basically had the guys who got kind of kicked off the job. It was a very difficult homeowner to work with, and so things weren't going right. And he goes, "Look, I don't want to send the guys back there because this guy is kind of hostile." I said, "All right, man, I get it. I got my own thing going. I really don't want to get involved with this, but I kind of like this person." And I thought, "All right, man, I'll go there and I'll take care of it." It was just putting a few more pieces of molding back on, some little bit of trim work, and you're done, right? So when I got there, he had a glass door in front, real expensive, nice glass door. And he came out and he's meeting with me. He goes, "Oh, so they sent somebody else, huh?" I said, "Look, yeah, I understand. I kind of get the background story here. Just so you know, I'm not involved in any of that, but I do understand that, you know, what needs to be done. I've given the punch list, but you and I will walk through it. So make sure we're both on the same page." And he liked me, right? We got along, and he goes, "Yeah," he felt finally, you know, I feel like we're going to get this thing done. So, you know, when you take the hose and you connect it to the compressor, you know, that connection, we plug it in there.
Yes. Yeah.
And the compressor sitting by the door. I go to plug that thing in there. It slips out the back of my hand, hits the window, and shatters the window, the door window, all the pieces, in a million pieces. I turned around, I looked at him. I was like, "Man, nothing needs to be said, man." I said, "Hey, so give me a bill." And that was probably my number one worst. And you know, I had a dream the other night. As long as I've been out of doing floors, I had a dream the other night that I was doing a floor. It's the weirdest thing, and it's always a problem floor when you're in my dreams. You know, you ever have those dreams?
It's spooky.
Yeah.
And Pauline can tell when I've had those dreams. I always have a dream of working for my uncle again.
I'll be darned.
Screwing things up, And there's been so many times where I'm having a dream of working for him, doing some kind of bowling alley thing. And in the dream, I'm thinking, I don't even work for him anymore. I don't even
Yeah.
do this anymore.
Sometimes that's what wakes
But
you
I got
up.
to get stuff done. Yeah, Pauline thinks that I need to definitely seek help. But yeah, I have that dream. I have those working dreams a lot
Yeah.
from
They don't, it's weird how they
family
don't go
business
away.
dreams.
Yep. All
And it
right.
wasn't like
So
he was mean or anything. It was just asking me to do things. I'm like, I really don't have but you have to. It's a weird dream. Yeah, let's
in
spooky.
my dream, nothing, it doesn't make sense logically. Like I would never do that. I would never be in that situation, but it's always a quandary that when I'm in the dream, like, man, and I'm having to fight my way out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's,
yes, that is. But it's always my uncle. It's always a uncle in a bowling alley thing. Always.
pretty
Yeah,
funny.
crazy.
All right.
Yeah.
Costly mistakes. Rob, what's a costly mistake? And actually,
Oh, the first
before
one
we
that
get,
came to my head, first one that came, like that one that you blew the window out. As
Mhm.
soon as you said cause some mistakes, the first one that popped into my head, Pete and I are doing his floor, and I'm running the buffer. Now it was old time buffers. Now you know that the buffers of today, right? They have a safety switch to turn the handle on, right?
Mhm.
You got to do whatever,
Yep.
unlock it so you can. Well, the old buffers, remember, you had like a cruise control on it. You could pull the handle and then push the button down and would lock that
Yep.
handle in, and you didn't
Yep.
have to hold the handle anymore, right?
Mhm.
You remember those? I don't
Oh,
think you see those
absolutely.
anymore, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you run the buffer all day long. Well, I went too far on some in one of the rooms, yanked the cord out. So Pete was in that room. I go, hey Pete, do me a favor, plug me back in, will you? And as soon as I said that, I turned and walked away from the buffer, like
Wow.
to really do something stupid, like go stare out the window or something. Wasn't even, I wish I could say I jumped down to scrape corners or what. No, just walked away from it.
Ah.
He plugs that thing in, and that buffer took off, spinning, 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 and just by about a foot missed going through a built-in china cabinet, but it did go right through a plastered wall.
Oh,
Huge hole in it. You want to see something funny? You see a buffer stuck in the wall. Look like a piece of modern art.
that's brutal.
Yeah, that was a
Them
good
old
one.
buffers, them old buffers were like that though, man. I remember them. You put that switch on and you could just cruise.
It had cruise control on it.
It was a nice feature, but it was kind of it wasn't really safe.
And I
All
bet
right.
every floor man out there listening to this has seen somebody do this one. It was funny because it was the first time Bum did it. He yanked the cord out when he was edging one day, and it's not the buffer. If you do that with a Bona edge,
Mhm.
if you pull the cord out, the switch turns itself automatically. But we were using the old Clark edger, right? So we flipped the switch. Well, he goes running over, plugs the machine in, plugs the edger in, and of course it just started, spinning.
Mhm.
Pulls the cord right out of his hand. I wasn't upset. I thought it was kind of funny. And I said, that's the quickest way I ever saw anybody roll up an edger cord in my life. That was a good idea. I said, but the look on his face, he's probably around 12 years old. Oh my God.
Uh,
The look on his face when that thing just shot out of his hand.
nice. All right, I'm going to tell you one that is actually quite common, Rob. And again, these are costly mistakes. And one of them, and this actually comes from Brian Rathbun, our territory manager out in the Rocky Mountain region in Colorado, is rushing the stain and coating too soon. And I think everybody's been in that situation where you walk into a floor, it was stained last night, you've got to get that coat on. You walk in and you can tell by the smell, right? It just still smells a little bit too strong. It's a little bit too tacky underneath your feet. And you start thinking, oh man, I got to get this thing coated tonight or today. And you go ahead and coat it anyhow, hoping for the best. A lot of times you can tell as you're coating that, you'll get stain, the stain will pull up in your finish. which is a pretty good indication that, yeah, this probably wasn't, well, it wasn't dry. Um, those you don't sometimes pay for until down the road, right? Where, okay, well, looks like maybe we got away with it or whatever, but so it's likely you could have a soft finish, you could have peeling issues down the road or what have you. So that's one that's quite common, and it's just as we say, sometimes it's you just got to know when you know what you got to schedule, they got to schedule, but you got to honor the dry time, one of our commandments.
Since we mentioned stains and caused some mistakes, we have to mention stain rags
Yeah.
because we've just talked to too many people. We know too many people that have been, had some serious mistakes, costly mistakes with stain rags. So I'll give you the quick version of what we do in the schools, okay? Mother Nature, when you use a stain, you're going to have three types of oil in it, usually three types of oil, okay? Linseed, soybean, vegetable oil. So those are natural products, right? That's Mother Nature stuff. So when stain is used, when oil is used, one of those three oils is used, it's Mother Nature's job to dry that oil, okay? And she's going to dry it one or two ways. She's going to dry it with air or she's going to dry it with heat, okay? So if you take those stain rags and you lay them out and let them dry just in the air outside, even, if you lay them on the floor inside, they'll eventually dry. But if you take those rags and you ball them up and put them in a bag or a bag of dust or whatever, but you take away the air, Mother Nature's going to start to generate heat. And that generating heat is called oxidation, which Mother Nature is actually producing oxygen to try to dry that oil. That oxidation, that heat, leads to spontaneous combustion. Wayne, it's all Mother Nature stuff. It can't not happen if you don't take care of those stain rags. Anybody who's getting the NWFA, not the NWFA, but any of the wood floor magazines or the emails and everything, man, you're almost seeing this once a month now, where somebody has had a major fire due to stain rags. Back in our day, or back in my day when I was doing floors full time, 10% of my jobs were stain. I was talking to Bum the other day, and he said 90% of his jobs are stain. So that's why we're seeing so many more issues with stain rags compared to the old days, just because everybody is putting colors on the floor now. So, it's definitely something to talk about with your guys. Like I said, we're on the subject of stain, so I have to talk about stain rags and stain rag fires.
But Rob, it's cold outside. It's freezing out. I mean, it's wintertime. It's cold outside.
Doesn't matter one bit of difference. We saw a stain rag fire in a bag that was on a snowbank.
Yeah.
Temperature has nothing to do with it. It's chemical. Okay.
Yep.
You have an accelerant on that rag. You take away the air, and that's just going to generate enough heat. That oxidation leads to spontaneous combustion.
Yeah. Because there's so many ways to get distracted on a job. I think that it's smart. And towards the end of my career, it was a habit of mine anyhow, to when your job is done at the end of the job, take 10 minutes, sit down or walk the job and with a pencil and paper. And have a checklist that you go through in your head. One of them is, what am I going to need tomorrow that I don't have on the job now? Right? Do I need to bring some more spline or slip tongue? You know what I mean? Do I have enough paper for the job for tomorrow? Is there anything else I need to bring? Is there another tool that maybe I need to bring? Take 10 minutes and just slow down and just stop and start thinking the job through. That 10 minutes could save you a tremendous amount of time on the next day. But one of those things is where's the stain rags? When you have multiple people on a job, especially, like if there's one person on a job, it's more likely that know that's your responsibility. It's 2 or 3 or 4 people on a job, it's very easy to think, well, Bob's going to get it, right? I'm doing this, I'm rolling up the cords now, so I'm sure he's going to get it. But and as we get older, you know what I mean? To multitask a lot of things. Maybe like the younger guy might be carelessness. An older guy might be, you know what? I'm multitasking to all these different things, but that slipped my mind. It becomes just like just like when you're doing repetitious cuts with the table saw. Boom, 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 boom. You're doing them every time. Boom, boom. It's just automatic, and then automatic. You don't even have to think about it anymore. And then bang, the you get hit by the blade. So I think that taking that 10 minutes at the end of every day on a job is a valuable habit to get into. So yeah, rushing the stain, honor the dry time. I think is very important. And we've all gone out to those inspections down the road where the floor is soft. It never really set up like it could have, or it gets a cloudy look to it or whatever down the road. So taking the time. I mean, gosh, some of these things now dry relatively fast. I mean, back in the old days, man, it was 8 hours. If you're lucky. And also, by the way, when as we say, when you water pop the floor, if on the can it says 2 hours, that's out the window now, right? You've opened up those pores in that wood, and it's really going to drive them heavy pigmented stain if you're going really dark. And the dry time is what it says on the can is out the window. That can of stain is the same can of stain in January as it is in August. Same can of stain as it is in Florida as it is in Arizona. It's just the elements that we have to understand and we're working with. So, yep. All right,
I
Rob, you
just
got
want to touch. I just want to touch on a little bit what you had said about older guys and younger guys.
Mhm.
When we have new guys at the trainings, at the Bona training schools, I tell that to everybody. That's the guy you really have to watch. Is the new guy. Labor right now, everybody's trying to get new guys. So that is one of the things that we try to tell all the new guys and tell owners of companies and everything. This is something that you really have to watch with this guy who's first or second day on the job. He's just going to want to do something, you know, cleaning up, taking care of things, whatever. He wants to be part of the crew. He wants to help. So he's the guy that you really have to talk to about stain rags because, if he's new to the business, he's probably not going to, hasn't heard about anything like this. So he needs to be trained. You need to tell him exactly, man, these things are powder kegs. So have to be very careful with them because a new guy, he's going to look to just bury that stain rags down in some bag of rubbish or something, and just got to have that talk with him.
Well, I wasn't. You got to hear that echo back? No. I wasn't going to mention this too, but you talk about fire safety. You kind of go down that rabbit hole. You also have to talk about vacuum cleaner bags. That especially those little vacuum cleaners with the backpack vacs where you're vacuuming between coats. You have all those solvents and everything, and you got the motor underneath it that's hot. That bag, especially the more full it gets, the hotter it gets. We've talked about those before, making sure those are taken care of. And you also in the communication, you talked about the new guy. If you were to say, "Hey, go take care of those stain rags," well, what does that mean to a guy that doesn't know anything about the trade? You know what I mean? That may throw him in the dumpster. Or what does that mean? So,
Yeah,
all right,
exactly.
all right, Rob. What do you got? What do you got next? Want me to go next?
Documentation.
Yep.
Documentation. I mean, it killed me on a job. We installed a wood floor in a kitchen. I think I've even told this story before. Installed a wood floor in a kitchen. I mean, we knocked this thing out of the park. It was perfect. And the lady came and she's like, "Yeah, the floor looks great, but you really dinged up my cabinets really bad." And I said, "No, we didn't. We didn't touch your cabinets. We made absolutely sure that we didn't. You can see those are old scratches and bent." And she's like, "No way." She knew for a fact in her heart that we had done that to her cabinets, but her floors were trashy, so she was never really looking down. She never took a close look at her cabinets. We didn't touch the cabinets, and there were certain spots I was even like, we didn't even come close with a gun or anything in here. But we didn't document anything. We didn't take a picture. Well, back then we didn't have the cameras and stuff that we have now, so That's another thing that we talk about in the training class. Boy, when you see something, take a picture of it. See a split in a door, a crack, whatever, holes, whatever you see, take pictures, document this stuff, because if you don't, you're going to lose. The person who doesn't have the documentation is going to lose every time.
Yeah, and especially you're working around a marble countertop or something sensitive of that nature, or you kind of get a feel for the customer. Man, if you show that scratch on a natural finish floor, and your job you was a like an ebony color floor when you're done, well, how could we put the scratch there if it was there in the when you know what I mean? It shows here before. You can see the picture of the color of the floors before we started, and this is what's here now. And so, yeah, all important stuff, man. You're at a big disadvantage when you're in someone else's home on as to what happened and what didn't happen, right? Because you're in their home. I mean, who's going to believe your story versus theirs? So, document, document, document. Um, Putting traffic or mega down too thin, which leads to streak and scuff marks and less durability. Yeah, I think that's something to be, um, costly mistakes. Um, Nothing worse than having to do another coat that you didn't anticipate having to put on. It's much better than knock the two coats out and do them, hit the coverage rate and everything, than having to come back and when you didn't anticipate putting a floor on. That's a costly mistake, and a lot of the time it's just hitting the coverage rates. And the thing about that is once you get used to hitting a certain coverage rate, you're used to a certain look that the finish has, right? You know how it's going to look and how it's performing. If you start altering that, trying to change it from one way to the other, or try to put on this coat on a little heavier for whatever reason, or a little lighter for whatever reason, you kind of don't have that bar to judge by all the time about how it's going to look. So I think that's very important, that make sure you're consistent on the coverage rates. Frankly, when I roll, I put my finish on heavier than when I T-barred. I know that about my coating style. But I always try to and I would go through from time to time and measure it and see that I really, I figured 2 gallons or 2.5 gallons. How close was I to that? That's what it should have been. If I'm veered off of that, well, why? And then you talk about putting streaks in the finish and that kind of stuff, or early wear, those type of things. I mean, that's all comes back as costly mistakes.
Coverage rates, man. Coverage rates. I'll tell you another costly mistake. It should be one of our commandments: honor thy inner coat abrasion guidelines.
So that's interesting, because I want to change one of our commandments, and you want to change one of the commandments. Say that over
I don't
again.
know if I want to change it, but I want to add it. And I know we tell everybody, one of the commandments is read the directions. So you are going to get your inner coat abrasion recommendations on there. But man, oh man, I've seen some floors fail because people aren't following the inner coat abrasion recommendations. And when you're, especially with oil-based products, those are some pretty strong recommendations. If you're going to smooth out a floor using a maroon pad, you got to remember a maroon pad's only going to go about 350 feet. If you're, gym guys, if you're inner coat abrading 2,000 feet, and we would get that more with custodial staffs, maintenance crews, okay, in a school where they're using young kids and they buff out 2,000 feet using a maroon pad and not flip it. But nobody was really talking to them, explaining to them how important this inner coat abrasion really is. All of this really, boy, that's a costly mistake.
So I think that's why education is so important, because you can say, yeah, you hit it with a maroon pad. Okay, did you hit it with a maroon pad? Yeah, you did.
Yes.
But like you said, look at the coverage rates. I say the same thing about when you're buffing on stain. When we used to wipe off stain, we had an expression: you need to wipe off like a man. In other words, you need to put your muscle into that stain, wiping it off, right? Sometimes on a water pop floor and a heavy pigmented floor, I'd be ragging it on. My brother would be ragging up behind me, and then we have a guy coming behind him, and he was just a cleanup guy, right? Making sure you're getting all that pigment off the floor. I've seen guys buff floors, buff stain on, and use one pad to put it on and really not buff it off. And yeah, you stain the floor and what have you, but man, that's a lot of pigment left on the floor. You can come back the next day and take a white rag and put it on the floor for 60 seconds and then kind of wipe it with your hand on it and see what transfer you're getting. Was that stain really dry? When we look at costly mistakes, and we talk about white lines in the finish, especially on the end joints, is an indication of that perhaps that stain wasn't dry. So just for a lot of different reasons, man, honoring the dry time I think is huge, and coverage rates is good. And just because you wiped off, it doesn't mean you wiped off properly, or just because you buffed the floor doesn't mean you buffed the floor properly. I mean, that's where you're looking at the spread rates and really drilling down into that floor and really being a part of that floor and not going through the motions is so important.
Hmm.
You feel me?
I feel you, brother.
Okay. Let's see. Jeff Sheaves, our territory manager down there in the great state of Virginia and then that part of the world, said adding additional layer of plywood subfloor and ran screws into waterline placed in between the joists, flooded the basement. Yeah, I got a job one time and I looked at the job and the homeowner wanted me to do the floors over, and they were obviously brand new floors, 5/16 top nail floors. And he said, I need to have a bid to replace all these floors and put new floors in. And I'm walking around looking at floors, and they look beautiful. I mean, they had to be, you could almost smell the finish. You know what I mean? They were beautiful. And I said, well, I gotta be honest with you, something must have gone on here. I said, because these floors look pretty good. He goes, okay, I'll come here, follow me for a minute. And he took me downstairs. And then whoever nailed that floor off nailed it with 2-inch nails. And the nails came through the downstairs, which, by the way, was a finish downstairs. You know what I mean? It was nice. And instead of using the 1-inch nails, that's you're supposed to. They shot 2-inch nails all through the subfloor and the ceiling of the floor underneath it. So ugly mistake, man. Knowing what you're getting into. Same thing. And Jeremiah Strong noted that if you're using 2-inch cleats and you're blowing through the plywood, a lot of guys have turned to using 540 for sealers on primers or sealers on their subfloor for moisture protection. But it doesn't make sense to me to use 2-inch staples at times when you're going to blow through the bottom side of it, right? I mean, just for me, why not go to the 1.5-inch staples or the smaller staples so you're not going out the other side of that plywood? So, just things.
Well, it wasn't, that kind of happened to me, but it wasn't on a floor. Well, I guess it was on a floor. It wasn't on a floor I was getting paid to do, though. My brother bought this boat. I found this boat. Yeah, I found this boat. I have a boat, and I know my brother was looking for a boat. So I found this boat, really nice, open bow, you know what I mean? Merc Cruiser, the whole deal. Really brand new motor, good boat. He buys it and he goes, I got to get a new floor. So I'm thinking, how tough can it be to put a floor in a boat? I'm a floor man, been doing floors all my life. He got a price from somebody to put a new floor in. I think it was like $3,000. So I said, Chris, we can do that in a weekend. You and I, forget about it. Easy. And we did. We ripped out everything, going to town on it. And I'm thinking, man, I am the smartest I can do anything. I really can do anything. So we replaced the ribs and I'm screwing the plywood on top, right? Everything is going as smooth as silk. And then Bum walks up. Now the boat's in my backyard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he is we just couldn't be happy. We just can't, you know what I mean, right? We just can't wait to get out. And I'm walking on it like, look at this freaking floor. It's perfect, right? So Bum comes walking up, and he was younger at the time, and he goes, did you guys mean to have these screws coming out the side of the boat here?
Oh, no. Oh,
so I started laughing, right? I go, oh, pretty.
Yeah. Kid's got a sense of humor.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got my sense of humor. Exactly. He wasn't. I did. I screwed. Oh my
Oh
God.
my God.
You want to see? I can't
Uh,
believe that I did it. I was using 4-inch screws, and they came through about an inch and a half right through the. But it wasn't at the bottom. It was kind of out on the side. You know what I mean? Where the
yeah.
side of the boat kind of meets the bottom there.
Yeah.
I just missed it, you know, and put a whole row in. There was like 9 screws sticking out the bottom of his boat.
You pick up the
So then I
tools and
looked at him. I go, well, we really can't, do anything to it because if we pull them out, you'll sink. You know, he's like, you know what? You've done enough.
yeah. Thanks for your help. Oh man, that's brutal. Was it a
Screwed.
friend you said or a relative?
It's my brother.
Oh,
He still has that boat. He still has
well,
that
of
boat
course.
today.
He doesn't want to put it in the water.
No. He's brought it to a complete professional. Anything that needs to be done, do not bring it to Robbie. Bring it
Yeah.
to a professional.
Huh.
And the boats never run better.
Wow.
But man, what a sick feeling that was.
Um. Okay, so real quick, I gotta say you're in Texas this week. I was in Texas last week. I was there till Friday. I stayed Saturday. I have a good friend that was down there. Bassmasters. The tournament was down there at one of the lakes down there. So went to Bassmasters the Saturday and Sunday. We had a guide to fish on Lake Fork, and Lake Fork is a bucket list. Anybody who's into bass fishing would know Lake Fork, Texas. Okay, that is like a month. That's the factory of big bass in that lake. And I mean, a lot of guys I don't like. I've had guys before, and I'm not necessarily a fan of a lot of guys, whatever. But this guy was awesome, man. He goes, man, I've been crappie fishing for 2 days. I can't wait to get on the bass. I'm on them right now. I mean, they are there. It is time. It's been raining for 2 weeks. The forecast is 5 days of sunshine, man. This is awesome. I've been waiting for this day. Fantastic, man. We got in the boat with him, flying down the lake. About 3 miles out there, I look at the sky. It cannot be any blacker, right? And he slows down and goes, man, he goes, look at that, man. Isn't I got to take a picture of this. Look at Mother Nature is beautiful, isn't it? And it looked to me like we're getting ready to have a tornado, but I'm thinking, all right, I'm not from Texas. Maybe, and this guy's not too worried about it. And while he's got his phones out, he looks at the weather screen. He goes, oh my God. He goes, look. And it shows like the death storm is coming, right? And then there's boats coming towards us. And one of them flashed his lights at him. And he goes, I know that guy. He goes, hey, we got to bail, man. We turned around and Rob, within 10 minutes, it was a torrential, I mean, like a downpour like you've never seen before in your life. And worse than that, obviously, it was the lightning. You know what I mean? The thunder and lightning. You can fish in the rain, you can fish in whatever, but the lightning's a deal breaker. Rob, I had been waiting for this trip for 6 months. I never made the first cast in that lake.
Oh,
We waited around for another 3.5 hours and it just never happened. So anyhow, I'm sorry. You just brought up that boat and reminded me of fishing. All right. Stainless steel appliances, such as refrigerators, are easily damaged. They're hard to repair if you scuff or change the sheen on them. That is real, man. I tell you what, you got to be very careful with stainless steel appliances. Very careful. And I don't, you make sure you don't scuff them. Don't put your hands on them. Don't put dirty hands on them. Don't get adhesive on it. Be very careful with those appliances because they're expensive. And they're very easy to scuff and they're very hard to get the sheen right if you do. So, man, we used to tell our guys be deathly afraid of those. And I would, if they had scuffs on them, that's where I would take pictures of or take a video of, because I don't want to buy a refrigerator for something like that. So, big time, easy target to cause you a problem on a job.
we had a huge screw up, and it could have been even a worse disaster. We were doing, this guy built this huge log cabin, and he used those 2x4 plank floors type, like the tongue and groove pine.
Yep.
Everything looked great. We sanded it. We start pulling the upstairs. We were doing poly. And the guy came in about halfway through, we were done, and he starts screaming, stop, 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 stop. He's screaming at us. I didn't even think he was talking to us. I thought he might have been talking to somebody else, right? it is pouring rain of polyurethane.
No.
I mean, it is running through, and the only thing that's, I mean, it was a disaster, right? It was a cleanup nightmare.
Yeah.
But the only thing that saved us was we had draped all the appliances because we had been sanding, and that's from back when we were using bags and everything. So we just draped everything. So everything was covered in plastic.
Oh,
But
thank
if
God.
we had not covered those appliances in plastic, it could have cost us thousands of dollars.
Wow.
But
Holy
I never
smokes.
saw anything. I never saw it was polyurethane rain in this whole
Wow.
downstairs. Crazy.
Well, you just talking about refrigerators, this came to my mind also is the insidious leaks that you get from ice makers. We never hook up an ice maker. We had air sleds, like a lot of guys have those air sleds, which is, by the way, one of the best tools. That's another don't leave home without it type of tool. But flat out, do not hook up ice makers. Nope. Never do it. By the time you find out it's leaking, it's caused so much damage. It's so easy to leak. I mean, you're the last guy that touched it. You know what? It's never worth it. I strongly urge people not to hook up ice makers.
Have you ever
Any,
popped one?
pardon me?
Have you ever popped one? Popped a
No,
hole in one?
no, I don't believe I have, but we've had our struggles with them where we couldn't stop them we couldn't really get them off or whatever. And, we had to do that fireman drill that we didn't want to do, but never had a real disaster from it. But
We flooded out a kitchen and a dining room one time. We were pulling up the subfloor, and I had rolled the refrigerator out so we could get the subfloor out of that. And I looked over at Pete and I said, "Hey, just as I was pulling it out, I said, be careful on that pipe there. It's kind of tight." The words were still floating around in the air. Okay.
Mm,
And he had just gone over and, just
that
gave
one
the
last
plywood
wrench.
just a little pull, right?
Yeah.
And the pressure of that water that was coming out. So we run downstairs to turn it off, right? The little spigot, they had their basement finished. And the
Oh,
guy who did it, plywood, or he finished that ceiling.
oh no,
So we couldn't get to the turnoff.
you're doomed.
There was no way to stop this water. It just kept coming. We finally had to go outside and turn the whole water thing off, the whole water main that was coming into the
Yeah,
house.
you should have beat the hell out of each other and tied each other up and say you were robbed.
Oh my God. But it was we laugh about it now. But like I said, "Hey, Pete, watch out for that. Watch out for the pipe." And 2, 3, 4 seconds later, the water
That's a
is
sick,
just shooting.
sick feeling, man. I pulled up in my grandparents, my father-in-law's driveway, and as I made the turn into his driveway, the stain spilled out of the side. It was in the lower part of the van, where the door closes, that section there, and just the van, the stain just started leaking out the sides. As I'm going up to meet them, I'm like waving like hi, and I see him like go crazy, like and then she went like, oh my God, and they're like running around. He goes, "What are you doing? I mean, what are you, my driveway?" Um, I never did to a customer, but I had to get out the wire brush. I had to get out the poly paint thinner. It was a nightmare. So easy. That's the thing. You in this trade, yeah.
We've talked about, we had the family and friend shows and people liked that one, right?
Mhm.
There was something I forgot to tell you about screwing up family and friends. There is not an occasion where my brother doesn't bring that up.
See, yeah,
The screws in the boat. It
yeah.
doesn't, I can never win an argument for the rest of my life, okay? Because of what I did
Well,
to
that's
his
the
boat.
thing.
Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, when everybody's around the table and, oh yeah, let's talk about the screws in the boat.
So, that's the thing, yeah, 5 generations, I've done this, I'm
Yeah.
a trainer, I do all this, I've been around the country, blah, blah, but you're never going to beat that screws in the boat story. You'll never live it down.
Nah,
What is the price of that worth? You know what I mean?
maybe that's a good idea. See, I'll see if I can buy that story from him. You can't use
Yeah,
that story anymore. I
yeah.
bought
I
it
gave
from
you 3 grand. Yeah,
right.
for that to go away. Okay. This one here too is one that's happened to a lot of people. That can happen very easily. You turn off the power somewhere, or you throw the wrong breaker. You go into a box and you disconnect the wrong one, and you got a refrigerator out, a freezer out in the garage somewhere, or and all the food goes bad. You lose the power. So it could happen very easily. So that's why I say, you charge $3 a foot or $4 a foot or $2 a foot. You have to take in consideration the risk and liability that's in this job. If you're in this job for any length of time, you are going to screw up somewhere. Somewhere, knock on wood, it's not bad, but somewhere it's going to cost you some money to be in business. So that's when we talk about having to charge for things. That's another reason why you have to. A freezer full of bad meat is expensive. Now, let's say the guy goes deer hunting once a year up to Wisconsin, right? He has all the meat processed. He comes home. That's just not just food. That's his food that he went out and killed like a man. You know what I mean? And you've destroyed it. So there's not a good looking coat out enough out there to beat that, replace
Did you
that
do
guy's.
that? Did you ruin a guy's
No,
venison?
and I'm not a saint, man. I'm trying to think of if I've ever done that, and I just can't remember that we've ever done that. We've had our share of mistakes. Everybody has, but I don't think I've ever done that. Um, but very easy, man. I mean, it could happen very easy. One thing I used to say, we would turn the refrigerator down very low when we were coating, so that air didn't kick off when we were coating. So I was always concerned that that would be an issue that we forget something like that. You know what I mean? And by the way, we're talking about refrigerators. Another mistake that people make is if you're going to remove that refrigerator out of the room, say down some stairs or whatever, you tilt that refrigerator back, you can destroy the refrigerator. You can ruin that refrigerator and end up having to buy a refrigerator. Refrigerators are not supposed to ever be tilted backwards like that.
Really?
So, yeah. So, that very, very easily that you could have them buying a refrigerator for that reason too. So all these things, man,
You
costly
see, this
mistakes.
show just isn't about wood floors.
No,
We're teaching you how to repair boats, how to repair refrigerators.
it's about screw ups.
It's like, we could do a 9-hour show on screw ups, or I could.
Yep. Yep.
I bet there's some good screw up stories. If you're listening, send us your good screw up story. We could put a
Yep.
book together.
Not using wood filler. Um, and ending up with peaked seams if you're flooding a floor, that first coat of sealer or whatever, and you're using a lot of finish, that you're rolling on a lot of finish, and it's a thin floor, um, and you don't have wood filler down there, or you get bleed back sometimes because of that, or poly beads down the road. So wood filler can help you in a lot of different ways. Just got a picture of a floor from somebody today that the guy had 2 coats on, and they're wondering what's going on with that floor. Um, it looks cloudy in certain areas and whatever. And when I really dive in and look at that floor, it's wood filler that did not all get sand off in that last pass. Um, we stopped using 100 grit to sand off our wood filler for that reason. I just didn't feel like it was there was an opportunity there that it would leave some of that filler on the floor and on a natural finish or whatever, and you wouldn't quite see it or whatever. Then it shows up later over time. A lot of I mean, it's just it's a thinking person's game, this business, because you can say it's simple. I mean, you go through the steps, you get the results, but the step isn't just a step, right? It's a step done properly. We always say that everything you do should complement what you're getting ready to do next, right? And just because you've, like you said, just because you vacuumed the floor doesn't mean you vacuumed the floor. Just because you've stain the floor. Doesn't mean you hit the right coverage, because you abraded the floor. Doesn't mean you've really abraded it properly, because maybe you use a 320 and you try to do 800 feet with it. I mean, so there's a lot more to this than a lot of people that's not in this trade realize.
We had this
So
old guy who was kind of the trainer on my dad's crew, and he had a saying, "You can't be a robot when you're sanding floors." He
Yeah,
goes, "You just can't be a robot. You can't look at it like you're going to do the same thing every single day, where you think you're going to be doing the same thing every day. But all these jobs have curveballs, and you have to look at them individually. Can't be a
that
robot."
that is one of the best things I've ever heard. I love that, because I used to say you can sand the floor like you're mowing a lawn, right? You're just going behind the sander. You're just not thinking. You whatever, but I do it every day. You're not even thinking about. Or you can look at the floor. You can read the floor, and that floor will tell you what it needs, right? And you'll start realizing the really small details from one job to the other that make it successful or not successful. If you
Yep.
care that much, you know what I mean? We'll wrap it up here. There's a lot of different ways. It's just this, just thinking about a few things out there that can cause you, and maybe they'll kind of make you think about how there's pitfalls out there, right? I always say that, if we look at what we have on our side of the equation going for us, if we look at here's everything on our side of the equation, and then if we look at things that could potentially go against us, the list is a mile long. So at the end of every day, and you take 10 minutes to yourself, sit down at the end of the day and think the job through, what you're going to need the next day, and just kind of be careful. There's a lot of pitfalls out there, and we don't want anything to distract from our schedules and beautiful jobs and what we love to do with this trade. So there you go, Rob. All right, this has been another episode of On the Floor with Wayne and Rob. Please stay tuned for another episode.